Good evening. Today is Tuesday, January the 12th. Today in geometry, we looked at parallelograms, and I'll share the screen here and show you some of the properties that we have of parallelograms. If I draw a parallelogram is defined to be a quadrilateral with two pair of equal, a parallelogram is a quadrilateral with both pair of opposite sides parallel. So if I come in here, so that means that this side would be parallel to this side, and this side up here would be parallel to this side down here. Now, I can talk about parallelogram, and when you see this little symbol here, this is a parallelogram symbol. And I can talk about parallelogram A, B, C, and D. And what you normally do, like let's say this would be A, so you go around in order. So this would be B, and this would be C, and this would be D. Now, so you have a couple of properties here. If we look at the first property, we could say that opposite angles are congruent. Okay, now that's property one. That's a theorem. Opposite angles are congruent. If we look at how this works, we know from parallel lines here that angle A and angle B, so we can say the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle B is equal to 180 because they are consecutive interior angles of parallel lines. Now, by the same token, we can have the measure of angle A plus the measure of angle D equal to 180. So if we subtract the measure of angle A from both sides, we have the measure of angle B equal to the measure of angle D. Okay, so that's the proof that the opposite angles are congruent. Now, in order to prove the next thing that we have is that the opposite sides are congruent. And the way we can prove this, we will prove a couple of things at once here. Let me just write down the other things. The opposite angles are congruent. The opposite sides are congruent. The consecutive angles consecutive angles are supplementary. And that's basically what we used right here with this relationship, and that comes from parallel lines. And then the final thing says if one of these angles is 90, if one 90-degree angle, then all four are 90 degrees, okay? And then the next thing we have, and we can use this to prove the second part here, it says if I draw a diagonal, which I can do here, if I draw a diagonal splits the parallelogram into diagonal creates, or let's just say creates, two congruent triangles, okay? And the final thing says here that the diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so now let's go ahead and prove here. If we look, we can prove this one here. We can prove this one here using the same triangle. So I know here, for instance, if opposite angles are congruent, and I know that angle B and angle D are congruent. And then I've got BC here and AD are congruent because, well, that's what we're trying to prove. So let's don't do that. But we've got AC here, which is reflexive. And then we've got angle BCA here, which is right here, is congruent to DAC right here. So I can prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle CDA, and the reason is angle side. So now I've just proven here that diagonal creates two congruent triangles. Now, if you remember, with a congruent triangle setup, we have 6 pieces of information. 3 of them we have used. So the other thing says now that BC, we can say BC is equal to AD, and we can say that AB is equal to CD, and this is basically because we have our corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, so we've basically proven here that diagonals create two congruent triangles, and we've proven that the opposite sides are congruent. Okay, now let me go ahead. If you need to look at this, you can pause it for a second. I'm going to erase this. I'll come back in and show you how we prove the last part, which is that the diagonals bisect each other. And that's basically we're going to draw ourselves a parallelogram. So here we go. We'll go like, let's say that much. And we come down here and we say that looks about the same. And I can go from here to here. I can go from here to here. Okay, now, so we'll label this one. This will be, once again, A. This will be B. This will be C. This will be D. Now, we're going to draw the two diagonals. So we got one diagonal that goes from here down to here. We got one diagonal that goes from here up to here. And we're going to label the point in the middle E. Now, what I want to do here, I'm trying to prove that AE and CE are the same and that BE and DE are the same. So what I do here, remember, opposite sides of parallelograms are congruent. So this and this are congruent. Right here in the middle, I have two vertical angles. And then I can come in here and say that angle BAE, which is this little angle right here, is congruent to this little angle right over here because of alternate interior angles. So now I have triangle AEB is congruent to triangle CED, and that's because of angle, angle, side, once again, angle, angle, side. And then if you'll notice, see, so now I can say that AE here is equal to CE, and BE is equal to DE. So I've proven that the diagonals of parallelograms bisect each other. So now, if you look, if we just have a situation here, for instance, if I say that this right here is 2x plus 4, and this over here is 10, and I want to solve for x, I basically say, okay, since the opposite sides are equal or congruent, then I can say that 2x plus 4 equals 10 because opposite sides are congruent. And I can say 2x equals 6. So x equals 3. Okay, now, so you've looked at the properties that we talked about with parallelograms, and these are the types. If you have a problem that gives you BE is one thing and DE is the other thing, you set them equal to each other. If it says that BAD is one angle and ABC is another, then you add them and set them equal to 180. So those are the way you work the problem. So look at your homework. If you have any questions, get back to me with an email, and I will show you some other things. But this should give you what you need to work your homework problems. Now, tomorrow we will look at the reverse of this. Today we said if we have a parallelogram, then we have opposite sides equal, opposite angles equal, diagonals bisect each other, consecutive angles are congruent. Now, so tomorrow we're going to turn it around and say, okay, if I have a quadrilateral with opposite sides equal, then it's a parallelogram. If I say that opposite angles are equal, it's a parallelogram, and so forth. So you'll see tomorrow, when you look at tomorrow's lesson, that some of the same things we're looking at today will come back, and you will see them repeating. So I'll stop sharing here now. I hope you are doing well. And I will stop recording, and I will see you again tomorrow night.